What's good, people? This is your boy Fadarryl, and this is another episode of Fadarryl Speaks. Also, the first official episode to my new series, Dear Black People and Allies, where we will be discussing race relations in America as well as globally. Before we begin, I would like to encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. It always helps with the algorithms that YouTube uses with ratings and all that other jazz. Without further ado, I kind of want to lay the foundation on what this series is about, kind of answering some of the questions of the who, what, when, where, why, and how of this conversation. So without further ado, let's dig right in. The first question I want to answer is who? Who is this series directed at? Who is this conversation for? Who particularly am I talking to? Who does this particular topic impact? And for the sake of just being really short, let's just say everyone. Anyone that has anything constructive to add to the conversation of race relations, both nationally within America as well as globally, this conversation is for you. But particularly, this conversation is for Black people, Black Americans, actually dealing with the struggle of racism and oppression at such a extreme level right now, currently within our current age and so forth. Not to diminish anything historically, but right now we are seeing such overt expressions of racism and discrimination within our society, within our country, that it's impossible to ignore. So the conversation of who this episode is about is for anyone that's affected by that, but particularly Black Americans, simply because we are on the front lines. We've been on the front lines of this battle as it relates to racism, as it relates to discrimination, prejudice, and all of the oppression that Black Americans experience living in America. In addition to that, this conversation is for all people of color, because we also understand that Black America extends beyond the walls of America itself. We see that very blatantly with the George Floyd riots and how that exploded into such a global outcry for justice, a global outcry in recognition and solidarity that people of color are being oppressed on almost every continent, in every country of the world. And so because of that, we understand that the issues within Black America, while they are concentrated and compounded, they definitely spill well beyond the walls of Black America itself. So this conversation is for Latinos. This conversation is for South Africans, Africa as a whole. This conversation is for our brothers in the Caribbean. This conversation is for our brothers over in Europe that are fighting the struggle, our brothers over in Australia that are fighting the struggle. This conversation is for all people of color, including Asians, because we understand that even some Asians consider themselves people of color, understanding first and foremost that all races come from one race, and so thereby we're all one race, the human race. But if we're going to break this up and divide it according to the lines that we call ourselves and how we define ourselves today, then I would say this conversation is for all people of color, but not just people of color, people who are of non-color, who are, let's put it very blatantly, white people, and people who identify with some race that's not a color-based race. And so this conversation is specifically for white allies and anyone who sees the injustice within America and both globally and want to be a part of a solution to cause change, to bring about dramatic change, not just incremental step-by-step change, but has people who have a desire, no matter what your skin color is, to see race relations improve, to see the dismantling of white supremacy, to see a better change take place, both nationally, but as well as internationally. A change that impacts all hearts and all lives and the world at large. Okay, so now let's get into what we will be discussing on the show. As I stated before, this conversation that we will be having will be about race relations in America as well as globally and internationally. We will be discussing both the history of racism and slavery in America, as well as where we are present and where we are potentially headed in the future, and as well as some solutions that could kind of divert and reroute us to some better outcomes and some better goals as it relates to race relations. Let's talk about the why. Why is this important? Well, to be honest, we can turn on the news and we can see why this is important. It's very, very blatant that we have issues in America. We've had issues in America. We have never resolved our racial issues that America has had. We apply laws on top of it. We've painted a pretty face. We've tried to hide it, sweep it under the rug, hide it in the closet, ignore it, but it's like a dirty diaper, and it stinks up all over the country, and it stinks up our country as a whole, both whether or not you're directly affected by it, and it also has an effect on everyone that's here indirectly. So let's get into why we are having this conversation. Why is this conversation important in the first place? I think we could turn on the news and kind of answer that question pretty outright and directly. All over the world right now, we are hearing a cry of colored people, specific people who are crying as it relates to the injustices that they are experiencing at the hands of systemic racism as well as white supremacy, what we know as white supremacy. So this conversation is important because it really helps to determine the fate of our world. Where the heck are we going? How do we get here? And why are we here? Why do we see this outcry across the world suddenly? And it's not simply due to George Floyd. It's not simply due to Breonna Taylor, even though they were casualties in a long war and battle against supremacy. This is something that we have to acknowledge the whole world is experiencing, but Black America is experiencing it to such a degree where it's become so overt and blatant. The racism that the systems of America have been founded on, and is spilling over into the streets. So this is why this conversation is important, because the fate of our country and the fate of the world depends on it. So let's talk about when this conversation will be taking place. Other than now, this conversation will be taking place every Thursday on YouTube or Facebook. You can follow at Fadarryl Speaks. You can go on YouTube, Fadarryl Speaks, as well as Facebook, follow at Fadarryl Speaks, and you'll see the weekly postings of this conversation, as well as other episodes of Fadarryl Speaks. So be sure to check them out. So that's when it'll be happening on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. So be sure to set your alarms to make sure you guys are checking out the episodes weekly. And then I guess that when also includes the where. Where will the conversation be taking place? It will be taking place on YouTube as well as Facebook. I do have Instagram and some other social media accounts, but those will be used primarily for other things. This conversation, in terms of Dear Black People and Allies, will be taking place on, like I said, YouTube and Facebook primarily. How? Let's get into the how. How can you participate in the conversation? Well, I invite you to submit questions and comments, either on my posts, either directly on the video, but mainly submit your questions to hello@fadarrylspeaks.com. Any good questions that are asked, that are show worthy, I'll definitely mention them on the show. We'll discuss them. We can even create whole topics around them. I definitely want to encourage you guys to feel free to partake in the conversation. This isn't just me talking. Even though I'm the only person on the show right now, at some point I definitely want to get other guests on the show. And so based on the comments, based on the questions, that would determine who's invited on the show. So feel free again to comment and again, like, share, and follow the video, and so forth and so forth. The email address again is hello@fadarrylspeaks.com. All right, so before we continue, I definitely have to take this opportunity to give a shout out to our sponsor, Wealthy Enterprises Online, one of the first online shopping malls where you can purchase everything you need, from pet supplies, fitness gear, home gear, as well as kid supplies and so forth. So be sure to shoot on over to wealthyenterprisesonline.com to check out all of the special offers that they have, and check out all of the online stores that this particular company is offering. Be sure to check them out. Welcome back. All right, so let's dig right on in. This episode of Dear Black People and Allies is entitled We Need to Talk. It's entitled that simply because we need to talk. This conversation of racism has gone as a silent poison to our culture, to society, to the world for way too long. It is the elephant in the room, sitting right there in the smack dab of America. In every home we see it, in every on the media we see it. It is reflected in every aspect of our society right now. So if we are going to uproot it, the beginning of that process is first acknowledging that there is a problem. And I'm assuming that because you're watching this episode or you're watching this show, that you have been tipped off, or you recognize that there are issues that we are struggling with. And so because of that, if we are going to rectify our issues as a country, as a nation, as a globe, as a global world, as a people, humanitarian wise, we need to talk. This conversation needs to begin first in Black homes, as the homes of people of color, particularly Black Americans, as we are literally on the front lines of what is potentially a new age civil rights movement. And if we are going to see any forward movement, or continue to see any forward movement, depending on how you're measuring it, we got to organize. We have to become of a sound mind. We have to develop an understanding of what our goals are, what the mission is. Black people are out there right now protesting, but do we have a specific goal and agenda, what it is that we're asking for? Have we rectified our own internal issues? Do we see the importance of this fight? This fight has been historically passed down to us. And so if we don't recognize the importance of continuing the fight and continuing the legacies of our Martin Luther Kings, of our Malcolm X's, and everyone else, our John Lewis's, and everyone else that have put their lives on the line in the past to make it so that we even made it to this point, to even have this conversation. So, Black America, I encourage you to listen up and to begin to really, really sit down and begin to have the conversation of where are we? What do we want? How do we plan on getting there? We don't have to do the yelling and the screaming. If we develop one voice, if we come up with one set of goals and agendas that we would like to see transform and happen within this country. Yes, we know that everything essentially needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, but as history has shown us, our white counterparts aren't so willing to cooperate in the rebuilding, especially if we haven't specified and solidified what our demands are. So I encourage Black people to begin this conversation, but also I encourage our allies to join the conversation. I encourage the world to join the conversation simply because ignorance is killing us. And the longer we stay ignorant of the plight that each one of us, each group of people are experiencing, we stay ignorant of our collective power and our ability to come together and really demand change and command change in our own disposition and our own behaviors moving forward. We need to talk because ignorance kills. The fact that white supremacy, the secret of white supremacy, is divide and conquer. It is to isolate one group of people and oppress them and separate them and make. You see the prime example with immigrants in America, how the civil rights movement began for a movement for civil rights for Black people specifically, and impacted the whole entire world, where now you have immigrants coming into America at droves, Latin Americans, Asian American, even Africans and so forth, coming into America, and white people dividing us and creating a narrative that all Black people are bad and stay away from the Black people and we're the issue with this country. I recently talked to an African who had been told, not only by members of his African family and so forth, to stay away from Blacks, but also by other whites to stay away from Black people. And so the ignorance that we have that we develop as we continue to not talk, as we continue to see each other as others as opposed to see each other as the same, it is killing us. We need to talk as it relates to poverty, because poverty is one of those aspects that keeps us from having a conversation. As long as we stay in survival mode, just trying to get by. We fail to have the larger conversation of how to get our people out of this situation and out of the current plight that we're in right now. Most of us are just surviving. Not to mention, on top of that, we have this pandemic, which has caused so many economic disparities to be magnified to such a degree that we cannot even no longer ignore them or pretend that they're not there. We need to talk. We need to talk because our media right now has infiltrated each and every one of our homes with images of an other that is an enemy, when the reality of it is we all have more in common than we have than our differences. And so to make someone or a group of people an enemy based off of a short list of differences when there's a long list of things that we have in common is a tactic that is reflected not only within our media, but within our politics and so forth. We need to talk. We need to address the media portrayals. We need to break down some of these false ideas of what each other are going through, what we believe to know about other races, other people, and really begin to have a conversation one-on-one. Get to know the other. You cannot claim to have a knowledge and understanding of a people, of anything that you haven't studied, that you haven't researched, that you haven't spent time with. It's important. We need to talk. We need to talk in order to break down the fear that has been conjured up either by the media, by politics, even by our family and our upbringing. The fear of the other race, the fear of the race that's out to take something from you, the race that's out to see your demise. The reality of it is only 1% of the whole world right now is winning. The wealth disparity of the have and have nots is so dramatic that even if you do win individually and you're able to gain a significant amount of wealth, you're winning while everyone is failing, while a whole nation of people are failing is indicative of the problem. If we say that we are a country for equity and equality, how is it that some people can how is it that we have such this huge wage gap and this wealth gap within America? If our country was built on equality and equity and so forth, it is very blatant that that's not the case. And those ideas and the ideologies of one superior race and or an inferior race are usually perpetuated within our upbringings, within our households, within our surroundings and so forth. So in order to break down some of that ignorance, guess what? We need to talk, not argue, not yell. Yeah, tempers may. Yes, this is an emotional subject, but talking is a commitment to communicate, and in communication requires listening. It requires that if somebody's talking, somebody has to be listening. And so we need to talk in order to break down some of the ignorance that we were taught by our parents, about other races. Africans were taught about African Americans. African Americans were taught about Africans, and Latinos were taught about blacks, and blacks were taught about Latinos. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We need to talk. Now, as I stated, not only do we need to talk, we also need to listen. We need to turn off our right to be right, our right to have an opinion has caused us to solidify our opinions into facts, unproven facts, unsubstantiated truths that we live and govern by. But if you listen to what your counterpart may be saying, and not only listen to respond, but listen for understanding, listen to find a point where you get it. I get that point. I get that point. It's not a requirement that we all agree. We are all different people. We have different history. While we are all living life, in 2020 together, the reality of it is that many of our lives look dramatically different across the board. So there's no way that you can fully say that you know all there is to know about a group of people, about a person or anything without any conversation, without any direct communication. And if you come into that conversation closed-minded, if you come into that conversation with your own set of opinions that you already determined to be right, then you're not coming into it with an ability to hear, listen, and understand. And with that said, we need to turn on our understanding, turn off our right to be right, and turn on our understanding. Human beings, we're intelligent for a reason. I need for white people of color, I need for all people to stop acting like you cannot relate to pain, hurt, despair. You cannot recognize injustice when you this blatant ignorance and this lack of understanding of what someone else is going through is killing us. And we are not hard of learning. We're not hard of comprehension. We get it when someone else, when we're directly affected by an injustice. Somebody overcharge you at the grocery store or at a store. We want our money back. We protesting for our refund, and we gonna make sure we get our money back because you overcharged. There was a wrong done to us, and so we want it to be right. We understand it when we are wrong, but somehow we act like we lack understanding when it comes to understanding someone else's situation. No. We need to begin to be willing to break down the barriers that have guarded our minds from seeing other people's plight and being able to position ourselves in someone else's shoes to be able to understand what they're going through. With that, if you just do a little research, you can find, we live in the information age. It's right there at your fingertips. If you really want to know what it's like as a Black American, if you really want to know what it's like as a Latin American, if you really want to know what it's like in Ghana and South Africa, look it up. Our ignorance, especially when most of us are sitting with a cell phone in our hand, is willful. we are being willfully ignorant, which is reflective in this pandemic in so many ways. Our willful ignorance, no matter, I ain't gonna even get there, but we have a tendency as a people to play blind, play dumb. But if you are truly an ally, and if you really, really, really want understanding, ask, seek it, sit down and ask for clarity, ask for understanding, ask to someone who may know a little bit more, someone who may be directly experiencing something that you don't understand. Ask. Your ignorance right now is simply because you choose not to know. It's willful. Also, we need to learn to make no assumptions. Make no assumptions about what you think you know about someone before they actually tell you their experience. And when they do, we need to learn to exercise compassion. Just because you haven't been in a certain situation, just because your people are in the press a certain way, just because you cannot relate to a certain system, or you're not directly affected by a certain system of oppression, does not mean that your knob for compassion needs to be turned down to zero on the matter. Compassion is what causes us to move in a situation that usually doesn't directly affect us. Compassion is what moves us when we give money to the homeless, when we donate to charity, when we donate to someone that's less fortunate. How is it that we're lacking compassion as relates to race relations, when compassion is one of the hallmarks of our society? We're compassionate towards animal rights. We're compassionate towards baby rights. We're compassionate towards gay rights. We're compassionate towards women's rights. We're compassionate towards the trees got rights. We're compassionate towards most all things except for each other as it relates to race. The color of our skin has the color of skin has blinded us. And I take that back. I take that back. I don't think we're blind. Again, I think it's a willful ignorance. So I definitely believe that we need to get back to compassion. Once again, turn off the negative voices that encourage you and reinforce some of these negative and racially discriminatory and prejudiced ideas and ideals, meaning we have to really go back and reevaluate some of our upbringing and how we even think about other people on a day-to-day basis. When you see a black person, when you see a white person, what are those thoughts that go through your head? We got to catch them and challenge them. Why am I thinking that way? Why am I feeling that way? Is this substantiated or off of something that is real, or is this something that has been taught to me from my family, has been taught to me from my surroundings, have been taught to me from my school, have been taught to me from the president, have been taught to me? We have to begin to really do some internal work and evaluation of where we stand as it relates to other people other than ourselves. For those of us, and many of us profess to be Christian, the good book says to love thy neighbor as thyself. Meaning, what you are willing, as far as you willing to go for yourself, be willing to go for the next brother. If you wash your dirty behind, be willing to wash the next. That is the challenge. That is the good commission of the book. Now, if you calling yourself a Christian, I would encourage you to go back and evaluate your ability to really, really love your brother as yourself. We have to evaluate the external components that influence our racial ideas and reinforce our racial ideas, again, within the media, our family, our friends, within churches, our politicians. It's really going to take a real deep introspective and external look at breaking it down to understand where did these ideas of superiority or inferiority come from. And in this conversation of us talking, we need to listen for agreement. We do a lot with exploiting and magnifying the areas that we disagree as it relates to race issues, politics issues. If we disagree on one point, we magnify that and throw all of our agreement out and hinge all of the areas that we agree on. Republicans and Democrats don't disagree on every point. So they got to argue about every point, but we spend so much time arguing about the points that we disagree rather than focusing on the point that we agree. We agree things need to be better. We agree, hopefully we agree that there are race relation issues within our country. We see that with George Floyd. We see that with Breonna Taylor. We can't ignore that. Can we agree? Can we be honest? Can we focus on the areas that we say, yeah, we need to address this because this is bad? And maybe get back to the areas that we disagree. Let's find the points where we agree so we can get work done there at least. Because it would probably lighten the way on how we can get work done elsewhere and in the areas that are more challenging and the areas that require more compromise and the areas that are more sensitive and require more understanding. If we learn to focus on agreement rather than disagreement. All right, so I think we're going to close out the episode on that point. With that said, I definitely want to encourage you guys to really, really begin to evaluate how racism is rooted within the paradigm of your own consciousness and how you operate, rather passively or aggressively, as it relates to race relations towards other people, but specifically begin to be willing to listen and really take heart to what is going on in Black America right now. If you've been blinded to it, willfully ignorant, this is the time to draw your attention. Our whole world right now is dependent upon our ability to come together and deal with this issue. I guarantee you, if we do not, our world, we won't survive. We won't survive. So with that said, I want to encourage you guys to like, share, and comment on this video. If there was something that I said that you want to respond to, feel free to email me at hello@fadarrylspeaks.com. I am definitely one who reads my comments and respond. The comments that are really good, I'm definitely looking to invite some of the commenters on the show so we can get a verbal dialogue going on. I have some special guests lined up to bring to the show, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this first episode. It won't be the last. So with that said, I'm signing off. But before I sign off, I definitely want to encourage you guys to love yourself and love each other.
Say, can you see I'm talking to a man?